Signed in. So I'm Shayne McKenzie. I'm the CEO, Clinic Director and Training Director at the Institute for the Study of Peak States. And I feel very blessed that I get to lead this organization. It's amazing. Signed in. So I'm Shayne McKenzie. I'm the CEO, Clinic Director and Training Director at the Institute for the Study of Peak States. And I feel very blessed that I get to lead this organization. It's amazing the research breakthroughs that our research team has come up with, and I really feel lucky that there's such a significant difference that we actually get to make to the clients who actually get to benefit from our work. So just quickly around the Institute. So we're predominantly a research organization, but we also provide training, clinic treatments, and therapy sessions. So as I mentioned, our research team are volunteer researchers, got a variety of different backgrounds, science, medicine, psychology, and other backgrounds. And it's a biology-based model that we're actually using for our research. And a number of the presentations will talk about that today. The training, our trainers who deliver the training, a very long-term commitment to the Institute, pretty much see themselves, this is what they're going to do for their whole life, and really highly experienced. Most of our trainers, I think, probably got 15, 20 years at least experience just in this work, let alone the experience they had before they came here. So very highly effective therapists. And there's quite a comprehensive certification process that our therapists need to go through. So our trainers are also assessors around that process. With our clinic treatments, there's a few clinic treatments we have at the moment, and this is where we hope that our organization will expand a great deal going forward with the Psycho-immunology framework that we have. So at the moment, Asperger's syndrome, Lyme disease, obsessive compulsive disorder, and traumatic brain injury are the main clinic treatments. And then we have a number of independent certified therapists. Some of them are just certified to do our trauma therapy techniques, whereas others are also certified to do our peak state processes. We're a very global organization. So we've got 64 certified therapists around the world. More than half of them also have some kind of role within the Institute as well, whether that's in training, research, or the clinics. We're in 19 different countries, which if you do the math means we don't have a lot of scale in any of the countries that we're in. So on average, there's 3 or 4 people in each of the countries that we are in, and also 11 languages that we deliver our treatments in. So very global in nature. Our founder and one of our co-directors of research, Dr. Grant McFedridge, none of this would have happened without him. So his background was engineering degree from Stanford University, which, as you'll hear in some of the talks, is a very key part of why this is a different approach that we're taking that's helping us solve a lot of problems that others have struggled with. He also taught engineering at California State University as well. He's got a PhD in psychology when his life path changed around heading more into this direction. Established the Institute in '99 to solve this problem initially around how to get peak states of consciousness, but now more broadly, just how to improve the overall health of humanity, and has authored many books on the discoveries he's been making along the way. And from a peak states perspective, he was lucky enough to have this amazing state called Beauty Way, or walking in beauty, as Native Americans call it, which he lost when he was 29 years old. He was hoping that, or kind of had thoughts around, wouldn't it be great if everyone kind of had this kind of state? When he was about 15, at camps in the wilderness, getting to meet other people that seemed to have similar kind of states. And then when he lost the state, that really changed the direction of his life and began the journey around how to get that state back, but how to improve overall health of humanity. So that's a little background on the Institute. So now let me just give you some of the key highlights over particularly the last 2.5 years around how our model has improved. So in the early days, we already were getting some success around killing pathogens, but we didn't actually have a model that allowed us to quickly come up with treatments or to predict what we might be able to achieve. So it was as early as we think around '97 was the very first time that we Grant worked out how to eliminate a single pathogen in someone that he could see with a kind of state of consciousness. And it was basically just using trauma healing techniques. Then it was then quite a few years later that we actually developed a psychobiology treatment for eliminating a pathogen altogether. And this is the basis of what we call our silent mind treatment. There's a fungal mechanism that impacts on voices that we have. So from the common person on the street, the kind of mind chatter that we have, but it's the same mechanism for schizophrenic voices as well. It also impacts on dysfunctional courting between people and something that we call tribal block, which is kind of a form of resistance. So we came up with our first treatment of that, and that evolved over several years until we got something that was fairly stable. But that was the very first time we got rid of a whole pathogen species. No, I'm not sure why. So I'm just going to have to talk about this without the slides. And then it was in 2006 that we first identified pathogens in the primary cell. So the Grant and the research team were working on how to eliminate pathogens, but didn't realize that these pathogens were in the primary cell. Now, for those that have never come across our work before, the primary cell is a single cell where our consciousness resides, and the health of that primary cell makes a significant difference to our overall health, and is at one of the cornerstones of our biological model to determine how to do trauma therapy, peak states therapy, and eliminate diseases. And then it was probably about around 2010 that we made the link that these pathogens in the primary cell have a much bigger impact on the health of humanity than we realized. And that's where Grant kind of had the future vision that we'd be able to eliminate diseases once we figured out how to come up with an effective treatment for eliminating the pathogens, the subcellular pathogens that they'd had discovered. So it was about 2.5 years ago that we got the first breakthrough that enabled us to have the first a new way of developing these psycho-immunology treatments. So that first breakthrough was around January 2020. So Grant had skin cancer at the time, and they were doing some research around that to better understand that, and ended up having to get surgery. But just at the time that he got the surgery, they also made a breakthrough that was I guess the first step in this new psycho-immunology framework that we came up with. So that was January 2020. So then it was a couple of months later that we were then developing our first treatments based on that initial breakthrough. So at that time, COVID was definitely a high priority for us, because COVID was really starting to outbreak, and Grant wanted to make sure that we can make an impact on that. OCD and Lyme's were diseases that we'd been investigating for a long time, and we wanted to work out, could we use this new psycho-immunology framework? And so we had success with that. So in the sessions, very quickly, symptoms were being eliminated. But we discovered later that the reason the symptoms were being eliminated was we were just getting rid of the toxins from the pathogen. We weren't eliminating the pathogens themselves. So then it was probably a month later that we figured out how to identify the actual pathogen, and came up with the first kind of treatment that targeted healing the pathogen directly. Then it was nearly a year later, February 2021, that we came up with Grant and Kirsten at the same time that they were teaching our psycho-immunology framework. Well, actually, they made this breakthrough around how to simplify the process, and that became a key thing that they taught in the psycho-immunology training they delivered last year. And then just at the end of it, they figured out how to make it even easier. So our students then kind of went off kind of practicing, coming up with treatments as we're kind of testing the safety, the first round of safety testing, as well as effectiveness around the different treatments they were working on. And then we discovered that in some cases it seemed like you completed it, but you hadn't. So Grant, Kirsten and Mary spent about 6 months kind of figuring out how to address that. So they added an extra step. And so from January this year, we now have a process that seems to be working much more effectively. So if we go through those kind of 5 generations, I've kind of touched briefly already around what was happening, but the first generation, that it eliminated just the pathogen toxin, which was great that it eliminated symptoms in the session, but then months later, the symptoms might have come back because we hadn't got rid of the pathogen. Then the second generation, we actually did work out how to get rid of the pathogen, and now the symptoms were being permanently eliminated, except that it was a really complicated process, which is quite often the case with the first version that we come up in the research process. So once we actually get something, the first thing is obviously make sure it's safe, then it's make sure it's effective, and then it's work out how do we make it as simple as possible for our clients to be able to complete the process as well. So then the third version, we worked out how to eliminate the pathogen with a lot fewer steps. So it was a much simplified process, which not only eliminated the symptoms, but also gave the clients a peak state, which was a nice added bonus, although it was actually quite hard. While it was simple, it was actually hard to complete. So then the fourth version modified the simplified process. And while we only, in that fourth version, it only eliminates the pathogen, it's actually a lot easier to complete, although we were then starting to notice some resistance to completing that fully. So then the fifth version added an additional step, which then increased our completion rate of the treatment. And so now a lot more clients are able to fully complete the process, and therefore we believe that's going to be a stable outcome. So pretty amazing. So two things. One, just incredible that we're getting these kind of results in very quick times. Like sometimes it's less than an hour in a session where the symptoms have already gone. But also getting to see the early days, late 90s and early this century, it was years between research breakthroughs, whereas now it's like months. And it's a very, very short time based on this framework to actually then come up with new treatments. So we're hoping that this current psycho-immunology model is going to end up resulting in a lot more treatment. So as I talked about, obsessive compulsive disorder, Lyme disease, and for some of the COVID symptoms, we have as current clinic treatments. It doesn't treat hypoxia. So we're still researching the hypoxia symptoms with COVID. We've been very recently did some initial research around type 1 diabetes. That's something we've been studying for a long time. Autism, the same. Traumatic brain injury, we think there's still, with this approach, quicker and more effective approach that we could take for that. And there's also some research around smoking addiction. I'm just giving you an example of some of the things we're working on. There's a lot more research we're working on, and then just potential research around Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, dementia, and the list becomes incredibly long as far as what that future research might include. So as I mentioned, there were 8 of our therapists that we trained in this psycho-immunology design approach to help us achieve this goal. So it's great to have a larger team given there's so many potential applications. And again, just briefly mentioning where you can find information, whether it's around research, training, clinics or therapies, or in social media on YouTube, Facebook, or you can email me.